Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today, with more LGBT representatives in the public eye, we discuss what impact they have.
So tell us who you are proud of and why the rest of the world should know about them. Tweet us or leave your comments in our live YouTube chat, and maybe you could also be in the stream.
Hi, my name's Sharice Davids. I'm a Democratic candidate for the Kansas 3rd Congressional District, and you are in the stream.
LGBT politicians are slowly gaining visibility and reaching their nation's highest offices.
Something that was unfathomable until very recently. Worldwide, there are 4 heads of government who are also part of the LGBT community. In 2017, 33 LGBT representatives were elected to the British Parliament. And in the United States, there were over 400 LGBT candidates running for office in this year's midterm elections. So, what does it take to be out and in the public eye? And what impact does that have on all of us?
Well, here to discuss just that, in Caracas, Venezuela, we have Tamara Adrian, a member of the Venezuelan National Assembly and the country's first transgender person to be elected to office. In Denver, Colorado, Leslie Herod, she's a Colorado state representative and is the first African-American LGBT candidate elected to the state legislature. In the United Kingdom, Sunil Pant, he's a former member of parliament in Nepal. He's also the first openly gay politician to be elected in Asia. And in Nairobi, Kenya, BC Alimi. He's a TV personality, actor, activist, and executive director of the BC Alimi Foundation. That's an organization that fights for the rights of LGBT people in Nigeria. Welcome to the stream, all of you. So good to have you here. Our community is really resonating with this topic, or the topic is resonating with our community. This is Brian Sims. I want to start with a tweet here, and he says, on a positive note, great way to start off a show, there are more openly LGBTQ people running for office than at any other time in U.S. history. I think we are uniquely qualified to battle the awfulness that we see in government lately. Femi?
So the one thing I noticed, Malika, as we were introducing everybody, they're all first in their field. And Bissi was the first person to come out on Nigerian TV. So he is also a first. I am just wondering, Guess, that weight of being the first, what is it like? Is it a weight? Is it a release? What is it? Bissi?
I think it's a release. It's indeed a release, because you find yourself in a position where you're trying to find someone to look up to and you can't. And at that moment, you have to write your own history. You have to set the pace. You have to do something no one has done before. And it's quite challenging. It's very scary. But it's also exciting as well.
Leslie, you're first too. What was that like?
Yeah, so I would say, as the first African-American LGBT person to hold elected office in Colorado, it is a relief, but it's also this feeling of immense responsibility to ensure that we're representing in a way that encourages others to also run, to also be out, and to also be authentic. But it's a great place to be, and I'm glad that I can be out and open and serve here in Colorado.
Sunil?
Well, I wasn't conscious about being the first, because I was already out and then running a successful LGBT activism advocacy organization in Nepal. Then Constituent Assembly election was announced. Then I thought that was the good opportunity for us to get into the Parliament and sit around the table to decide the policy and new constitution for Nepal. And it just only after I got elected, some media reported that I was the first openly gay member of parliament, not only in Nepal but in whole Asia, and then realize how big history we have made in Nepal.
Sure. And Tamara, you're part of history as well.
Yes, well, I was out 11, 12 years before I ran. So I got this impression that it's your task to try to create awareness and to create this idea on which it is necessary to have positive impact on the life of everybody as a politician and not be centered on the LGBTI rights exclusively.
I want to share with you guests a video comment that came from the UK-based LGBT rights activist Peter Tatchell. So he recently made headlines following his arrest in Moscow for protesting on the opening day of the World Cup in Russia. Now he can be seen holding a sign which reads, "Putin fails to act against Chechnya torture of gay people." And the activist was then approached by police and he was briefly detained before being released. Here's what he told the stream about why representation matters.
It's really important to have out and visible LGBTQ public figures. And the reasons are twofold. First, to provide positive, affirmative images of LGBTQ people for those teens who are struggling with their sexuality or gender identity. And second, because the evidence is very clear. If someone knows an LGBTQ person, they're much more likely to support LGBTQ equal human rights.
Sunil, but what this means is that you are putting yourself out there as a public person and saying this is also my personal life as well. How do you do that?
Well, that was something really important for me personally, but also for LGBTI communities, because throughout the world, since last several hundred years, with the colonization, the homophobia and miseducation about LGBT has been spread throughout the world. So when I got elected, and I was very surprised to see how little the other legislatures, other member of parliament knew about us. But also staggeringly how they knew about, they were miseducated, and they have all kinds of fear. If we give LGBTI rights, then what will happen? About our moral and ethical standpoint. We will, so the very degrading view towards LGBTI people, and they see LGBTI people are dirty and lower class and cannot rise as a above the ethical standard, and are useless basically and burden to the society. So that I got that opportunity to demystify and educate them and reach out to those LGBTI people. So that's one thing, education to the fellow representatives of the people or the legislatures. The second thing was, if you are not represented there, then nobody will represent, nobody else is there to represent you. So the LGBTI rights and issues and policies are never tabled, never raised, nobody there to defend, nobody there to protect, and etc. So it's terribly important that out and open LGBTI people got elected to the office.
So now I'm so glad that you mentioned your work to demystify some strongly held beliefs in your community, because that is what some of our community members are working on themselves. This is a tweet from Malusi out of Swaziland. He says, "We're a population of 1.3 million, and we've many a times been said to be a country of a family. We need recognition from our government to be shown in legislation. We have no legal remedies from discrimination and stigma, and the country still criminalizes same-sex relations." So that's one example out of Swaziland. Another example came to us via a video comment. This is Arsham Parsi. He's the executive director of a group called the Iranian Railroad for Queer Refugees. He's now in Toronto, and this is why he said it is so important to have LGBT members in public office and in the public eye. Have a listen.
A lot of us in the Middle East, we are in the closet, and I think it gives us an opportunity to get into the politics, and then within inside we can slowly bring the change, because these laws are very difficult to tolerate. I used to live in Iran for 24 years, and it is very horrifying, and I'm sure there are a lot of LGBT people in the Middle East that they want to live in their countries, do not exit and escape from their homeland, and have some basic rights there.
Lucy, I'm wondering if you can take those two comments on people who see the importance of being in the public eye, but it's difficult. There are a lot of odds stacked against them.
Yes, indeed. And I spend a lot of my time in the public eye, and I know what it is like. One, like Leslie said, there is the expectation from the community for you to excel. There's so much pressure on you to be a role model, and you also become the wall that takes all the missiles and the insults and the attacks from people who don't see you as a person, people who don't think that you deserve to have a life, people who don't think that you deserve to exist in the first place. And the important thing is your consistency in being in the public space gives hope to young people or to other people who are struggling, who needed someone to say, if this person can do it, then I can do it. But it doesn't mean that you take all the bullets that are coming from people who are against the community. It's very much about how you strike the balance. But I personally think that if I'm given the choice, I will continue to stay in the public, because for every person who finds validation in my story, it's much more important to me than someone who thinks I don't deserve for my story to be heard.
Tamara?
I totally agree with you, Busy. I think the positive impact on the younger people of you being out, it's the most rewardable thing that you are doing, because you're creating hope for those who had been excluded and do not foresee for any future. And when they see you as an example, you give hope and you give awareness to this very difficult path.
Guess I want you to lean forward and check out your Skype. I'm going to show you a headline from the Daily Mail. This is from a year ago. Daily Mail: the first gentleman, husband of Luxembourg's gay prime minister, joins the NATO wives and girlfriends. Let me show you the picture. Ha. Leslie, discuss. Yes, discuss.
Well, I think we've come a long way in this country, in the U.S., when it comes to acceptance of LGBT African Americans or LGBT people in elected office, as well as policies that support and protect LGBT people from things like violence and discrimination. Unfortunately, we now have a White House and likely a Supreme Court that is less accepting and less tolerant of where we are today and where Americans are today. And so I get very concerned when I see anything coming out of Washington, D.C. when it comes to LGBT people, because I'm very concerned that our country will take a step back. And unfortunately, that means that our ability to also spread pro-LGBT feelings and policies around the world will be stepped back as well. And so right here in Colorado and at the state level, a lot of us openly LGBT people like Brian Sims are fighting at the state level so that people can stand up and say, we're not going to tolerate discrimination or hatred amongst or towards our LGBT friends, family, and counterparts.
And I hear you there. I want to bring up a comment from someone who talks about the challenges during the campaign. And so this is Ed. This is in the U.S. That says, I ran and won for borough council here in Pennsylvania in 2009. I was contacted by another councilman who had been called about a picture on my MySpace. Of course, you remember that site. You might be aging yourself there, but
I
with a friend.
What is that?
MySpace, the social networking site before Facebook. He says a friend who was a drag queen was pictured there, and he was told, I don't care what you do, but it's in your best interest to remove that picture. He goes on to say, I should add that this happened during the campaign, and it bothered me as I hadn't planned to make my sexuality an issue in this race unless it was necessary. But it was kind of offensive that people were sinking this low and telling supporters of mine that people were talking. Now, this is one example, Sunil. I know for you personally, you've had rocks thrown at you, you've had a court case opened against you. Talk to us about some of those challenges.
Well, those were usual challenges, and I wanted to talk about when there are discrimination and violence against one minority of that country, then other minorities are equally vulnerable. So there's a measurement a country can take on. We have had difficult time, state of emergency. The democracy was quashed by the monarchy then, who took the direct rule, dismissed the parliament, etc. So that was the time. The Maoist insurgency was also on its peak. and rampant human rights violation by many, and most suffered were the minority groups, LGBTI, people with disabilities, women, single women, the scheduled caste people, which is oppressed for centuries. So these are the things, we also faced. We faced court challenge, a fundamental, a fundamentalist who was also a lawyer, challenged and filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court demanding to close down the LGBT organization. Luckily, the court was, more enlightened than the government then, and then, gave a fantastic decision saying that right to organization by any minority groups or anybody is a constitutional right. So that was a big relief for us, but was a big, a challenging time. There was violence mostly by security forces, etc. So,
Sunil, if I may, what I think is extraordinary about your story is not only the activism that you've been doing and the political office that you held, but the fact that this was all happening in Nepal, which is not an area where we think, oh, it's a very progressive area. It's very open to LGBT rights. What do you think happened at that time to make it a place where you could actually run for office and hold office?
Well, one thing is, we have had enough of oppression and all the challenges, and we said, it's our generation who will fight for it. That's one thing. But also timing was very right, because the whole country going through a difficult time. The democracy was quashed and crushed by the bulletin boards. So all the other civil society were also, fighting. So we joined the force together, and then the whole, right to equality and inclusion and, eliminating discrimination, stigma was the, national agenda for everybody.
Okay.
So when 2007, we had this interim parliament, and then election happened, there was the opportunity and space was more open, and inclusive. So that's where we grabbed and took the seat.
I want to show you guests a movie that's been made about the life of Tamara. Here's the trailer. Have a look.
El profesor Almanza ha logrado dividir a sus alumnos y ponerlos a pelear, regodeándose egocéntricamente en eso de mostrarse como es.
¿Me va a ayudar con esto, sí o no?
Hola, profe. Qué bella.
Tamara, when you have a movie being made about you, you know that you're important. One of the things I was really curious about was, how did you campaign? How were you out there talking to the public and encouraging them to vote for you?
Well, actually, the fact is that when you are totally out, you do not fight only for LGBTI rights. You have the task and the duty to fight for everyone's rights, women's rights, minority rights in general, and for everyday's rights for everybody. So when you are out doing a campaign, you're talking to everyone and encompassing the needs of everyone, because there is not only the LGBTI community that's going to vote for you, it's everyone that you're asking to vote for you. And this is the real task, to be perceived and to be understood as a person who actually fights for everyone.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that you don't only fight for LGBT rights, because we got a good conversation going online among some people, and I'd like to share it with you. The first is a video comment. This is from Annise Parker, and she's the former mayor of the city of Houston and also the president and CEO of the Victory Fund here in Washington, D.C. And this is what she told the stream.
We believe that it is important to have out elected officials at all levels of government advocating for our community. They are good public servants. They work hard for their constituents, but they also shape the dialogue around the needs of the LGBTQ community. We have great allies, but we need to speak for ourselves, because we are also role models for the next generation of leaders that comes behind us.
So she mentions there, Leslie, that she is working hard for all constituents, but also members specifically in the LGBT community. And that's an idea that Brian here picks up on. He says one of the major challenges is recognizing that I can never fully represent the breadth and the depth of the LGBTQ communities while simultaneously being the only out person in my legislature. I have to teach, I have to explain, and I often embody the lessons that I've learned. Can you talk to us about that issue, about representing a community, but then of course not being the one spokesperson for all that community and having issues that affect the entire constituency?
Yeah, so here in Colorado, we're fighting for a lot of things. I'm fighting to make sure that we unite immigrant families with their kids, right? I'm fighting to make sure that people understand that Black Lives Matter and that people shouldn't be brutalized by law enforcement on our streets. And so there's this tie of issues that I work on as an African American person, as a legislator, as a community member, and as an LGBT person. And it's really hard to do that if you're the only one representing, because you have to build those relationships. You have to be your authentic self. But not everyone is like me. Not everyone in the LGBT community believes everything that I believe in or has the same experiences. And so that's why I think it's so important that we elect more LGBT people into office. So this last primary cycle, we made sure to expand the number in the LGBT caucus and actually successfully got 2 more members elected through their primaries. They'll have to run their generals in November, but I'll be there to help. And so I think that's also really important. I'll tell you a quick story. So I was working, I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and there was a bill that came in front of me. It was called a Live or Let Live bill, which basically it says that someone can refuse services to an LGBT person if they want. Now, as a Black person, that reminded me of the day when we had segregation, right? And Jim Crow laws, and these laws that said if you're Black, you can't eat here, you have to go to the back of the bus, or you can't use this water fountain. And it's the same bill, just written about LGBT people. Even more so, though, it affects all kinds of people of color, religious minorities, so many different groups. It would have a disastrous effect on them. And so we had this hearing, and I talked to one of the members who's from a rural Colorado, a very different place than the city of Denver. And I said, look, I don't think you're a hateful person. You've never showed hate towards me. But this bill would allow you to allow people to hate, allow people to discriminate. And I don't think that's who you are. I don't think that's who I am. I don't think that's who Colorado is. And I ask you to come with me, maybe even to a gay bar. Sure. Come with me to dinner. And let's have this conversation as people. And I got to tell you, he took me up on it. And he is changing his perceptions about LGBT people right now as we speak. And I think that's so important. So when we're there, we're not only able to work on policies that affect LGBT people, we're actually able to personally connect with those members who maybe bring up hateful bills and tell them who we really are and how this really impacts us. And I think that makes a huge difference.
Bissy, I want to show you this picture here. This is of a governor candidate for Maryland, not far away from the Stream studios. And this is him and his family campaigning. He made news for being the first politician to kiss his husband on a political ad. I'm wondering if you're seeing globally a change in attitudes to leaders, LGBTQ activists who are out there, who are leading the way, leading their communities, in the way that the public reacts to them.
Yes, indeed. And I will also share a very interesting story. I got married to my husband in 2016. And it was in November. And the next day, I got a picture from Lagos, Nigeria, that a national newspaper has put a picture of us at the wedding on the front page of
Bissy, I got 30 seconds
for me, that was very
left.
That was very shocking for me that that was very shocking for me that they could do that and they could celebrate that. I think that there are challenges, but more and more the representation is increasing. Many people are getting the boldness to be very affirmative about their love, because
Still
eventually
challenges.
we have to recognize that love is love.
I hear you,
and
Bissy.
we have to celebrate it in whichever way.
All right, Bissy and Leslie and Tamara and Sunil, thank you for being part of our programme. How's the conversation going down online, Malika?
I think it's an interesting challenge for some communities, and for others, they feel like there are more advances.
Our conversation continues always online, and you can look for our @AJ Stream Twitter feed and continue the conversation there. For now, Malika and I will sign off. Thanks for watching.